Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today we're going to have a look at one of my new orchids that I got at the show back on Saturday. And sometimes what you want to do ends up not being what you can do. And this may well be one of those. There's a difference between repotting, which is where you take a plant out of its pot and get rid of as much of the old media as you can, damaging the roots as little as possible, trimming off the old dead ones and anything that just doesn't look healthy, and then potting it up in some new media. That's the standard sort of practice. But there's also an option to pot on, which is basically as carefully as possible lifting a plant out of its pot without disturbing the media and all the roots, and putting it in a larger pot or repositioning it in a pot, and then topping up edges and gaps with new media. But most of the old media, well, let's put it this way, the old media that doesn't naturally fall off stays. And to do that, you need to know that the media you're leaving in the pot is good enough to stay there for quite a while and is not going to turn sour or, anything like that. Quite honestly, if a plant's in a clear pot, you may be able to make that decision there and then. But if, like this one, it's in a black pot, you don't know until you try, and that's the position I'm in. Now what I want to do is reposition and pot on, but depending on how it comes out of its original pot, that might not be possible. So let's have a look and see what happens. I'll move the camera. I was gonna shut down and come back on, but it's not worth it. Right, so I think that's somewhere near it. Yes, that should be okay. Right, this is the little plant in question. It's a Coelogene and it's granulosa, which is in fact a primary cross, and it's a naturally occurring hybrid. Somebody questioned the difference between a naturally occurring hybrid that occurs in the wild, in other words, it's a wild collected plant, and a naturally occurring hybrid that's been man-made. In other words, the cross has been done, in a nursery and the seedlings raised in a laboratory involvement. There's no difference. Yeah, it's basically, if it can occur in the wild, how it's produced is irrelevant. It's still a primary cross that can be produced in the wild. Now, this plant's got quite a lot of roots hanging out the bottom of the pot. That can influence lifting a plant out of the pot. These are not dead roots, but they're not growing roots. Yeah? So I'm hoping they'll pull through. If there's any hesitation, I will cut them off, because I want this plant to come out with its media if possible. Now I'm reasonably certain this bark round the top has just been added, so it is loose, so that just as well come out of the way, especially when you get a big piece like that that's been wedged in there. That's to help hold it in place and stop it wobbling around. I know their little tricks, I know what they're up to. So this is loose bark. This would fall off anyway, so I'm gently lifting that out of the way. Now, straight away, I hope, let's get the leaves out of the way, you can see very active live roots. So it is a reasonably well rooted Coelogene. Coelogene roots tend to be a browny colour, covered in hairs. They're hairy roots. Some Paphiopedilums are hairy roots like that. There may be other orchids, but those are the ones I know. Oh, and the logic. Why do I want to pop this on? Look where the two latest growths are. Yeah, they're right on the edge of the pot. Now, although they're on the edge of the pot, and if they are producing roots or will produce roots down the line as the bulbs mature, like some do, there's not a lot of room for them, and there certainly won't be any room for future growth. So that's the thing I'm trying to deal with. So let's see if it will lift out. I'm going I try and grab hold of the whole thing. The more things you grab hold of, the less you're liable to crush. Now this is coming out. Now what we've got here is bark that is reasonably firm, good active roots, including some growing tips, like here. That's a cotyledony growing tip. They are often yellow, sometimes they're greeny yellow, sometimes they're white. Yeah. So this is an actively growing plant. Now it's difficult to tell, but a lot of these roots here have come from this growth, but more of them have come from this one, which was the previous mature growth. Now it's a little disconcerting because we've got one back bulb that's leafless. The one after that, which is not quite as big, has got 2 leaves. The one after that has got 1 leaf that's been chopped off and one that's had a little bit of surgery. And then that's followed by the 2 new growths that have both got nice leaves. These are nice green new leaves. No sign of any flower spikes. I would suggest this is not blooming size, but what I would suggest is it will be with the next set of new growths. So by setting this plant up ready for these to mature and allowing it to grow on undisturbed. Rain. Oh, that will make a nice change, won't it? You know, that won't add any more water to the floods we've already got, will it? As if there's any form of control, which there isn't. Right, so I'm happy that this can be potted on, and I will make quite a bit of room for extra roots to come out of here and room to grow simply by changing a square pot into a round pot. Imagine a circle round the top of that square, and suddenly there's a lot of space here, isn't there, for new media to go down. So I shall pop this down. There's not much clearing up to do, but I need to sort out a suitable sized pot and get some media out here. It'll just be bark. There's no messing about with cotyledony like this. It needs to go in bark. The roots need to breathe, but they also need things to grab hold of. They do like some air. They don't need huge amounts of air, but you know, so my medium bark, which has got some small pieces in it, will be fine. And that's basically what it's in, is a medium bark with some smaller pieces. So we'll have a quick clear up, go and get a pot sorted out, because all my pots are dirty, so whichever one I choose needs a wash. And then we'll be back and quickly pop this up, and I might even go and do a proper label, because that label's been written wrong. Much to Simon Pugh Jones's embarrassment when I pointed it out to him. Being a primary cross, it is nothing more than a hybrid. That is merely a type of hybrid that comes from 2 species, as opposed to other hybrids which might be 2 hybrids crossed together, or a hybrid and a species crossed together. They're all hybrids. The difference between this primary cross and those is that this can exist in the wild, and as such gets a lowercase species name with an X in front of it to show that it can be occur in the wild. So, but I'm happy to stick with that for now. At least I know what it is. So, as I usually say, I'll be back. Okay, I've got a pot. It's roughly the right size. I'd like it a fraction bigger, but the next one's quite a lot bigger and it would end up with too much media. Now I've teased a little bit more out from round the back so that I can push that against the side of the pot, which leaves a bit more room round here, which does make sense. Now when you get a pot full of roots like this, you need to get it into your head that just because these roots are round the back doesn't mean they're old roots, because they could have grown from here right round to the back, like that. So these could be active new roots round the back of the plant, so don't disregard them, don't, you know. So anyway, we have our pot, we have our media, which is in the main a similar size to what's there anyway. There are a few bigger pieces in there that were certainly forced in around the top basically. So we put some in the bottom to protect the air cone. Whoops. Yeah, that's where all the ventilation is, so we don't want that blocked up, and preferably not overgrown with roots either. That's to let the air in and to let some moisture out. Now at the moment that plant is not deep enough, yeah, so we're going to have to take some media out. Don't be frightened to take some out. And basically I think the plant is going to have to sit on the air cone. Let's have a look and see what that looks like. That's about right. Yeah, top of the plant is a fraction below. Do you know I said this is not flowering size? Well, I wonder what that is then on the end of my finger, because that looks like a spent flower spike to me. Could be. It's not rotten, it's quite firm, so it's not like a new growth that rotted. So I think that might be a flower spike, so it possibly is blooming size. Which means it could bloom in theory on these two growths, or one of them. Right, so what I'm going to do now is hold the plant tight over so that the space I'm trying to make doesn't exist, which leaves space round the back. And then I'm going to drop some media down in there, not too much. Bearing in mind there are roots around there that are active. Now I'm going to push the plant against that media that I've just put in there and put some more now down that gap, and that's where I'm hoping the plant will grow into. Now because it came out of a square pot, we've done that side and we've done that side, but this pot, the original, has square sides, so we've got to do these two sides as well because they're flat. So we push it over one way, drop some media down in, then twist it round 90 degrees and do the last side. This side's got some actively growing roots. There's actually some growing root tips there. So it's important that there is some media. But I'm not interested in forcing media into these gaps. But because of the way the roots are, I don't think tapping it is going to get much down there. But we will try. Few air gaps don't matter. See, now what's happened now is the whole plant has lifted up. Does it matter? In this case, probably not. Could I do it any better? Without going to, I'm desperately trying to avoid going to a bigger pot. So, no, we'll do it like this, and then we'll revisit the plant possibly after these growths have matured and see what happens. If these growths mature, it might be possible to lift it out again and move it on. But at the moment I'm right up to the rim of the pot, which means every time I water this, some bark is going to get washed off. So be it. I'm looking at it, you know, health of the plant comes first rather than the convenience for Roger. So we've got plenty of media around all of the roots, including those few that are right near the surface. And those two new growths now, the roots are coming out of the base, yeah? And they've already produced quite a few roots. I don't think they will produce too many more. Those new roots off of these two new growths have gone down and right round the pot. Yeah, so quite a few of the growing tips on these latest roots are around the back of the plant now. They started off around the front, but it means it's highly unlikely that these two new growths will produce new roots that don't go down into the media. So I'm happy now that they've got room to mature, and there is room for the next set of new growths to at least get to this stage where they've produced their roots down into the pot and are starting to mature. That will be, I assume, in a year's time. So That's all I'm going to do to that. There is a large gap there. I'm not going to force media down into there. I'm really not going to. Let me just see if I push it gently. I don't want to break roots off. I don't think I'm going to be able to fill that gap, quite honestly. Oh, I don't know. If it moves gently without, you can visibly see it's not actually crushing roots. Well, it's not filled that gap, but it's made it a bit better. It's a bit tighter. Again, we've got a bit of a gap down through there. That doesn't matter. Plenty of media here, which is under this growth. Little tiny bit of a gap. Plenty of media under that growth. That'll do nicely. And just pop that in there. And there we go. So I've got to find a black pot now, similar to that sort of size. I think I can see one over here. That's probably about right. Something like that should do it. Lovely job. There's still a bit of light going to get in there. It's not a tight fit. And I did do a new label, so we've actually got a new label. I like to quite colour code, so I've got different coloured labels, and like all of the cotyledons have used that green colour. So I'm sticking to a pattern. Doesn't always work, because sometimes I run out of a colour and I need a new label, so I just change colours. You tend to buy them in a set of, of all the colours. And to buy them individually is quite expensive. It's only a little bit more to buy the set of 5. So you tend to get a new set of 5. Anyway, we'll tuck that in the back there. Whoops, we'll do it the right way round with the name facing outwards so that I can see it without necessarily picking the pot up. And we'll give that a water now. The media was watered yesterday when I watered all my plants, but because it's quite airy bark with quite a few air gaps in it, it's not soaking wet. The middle of the pot is probably still wet, but the edges of the pot weren't. That bark that we dislodged was not that wet, it was damp. So we'll give it a good watering, because this bark's a little bit dusty. Get the dust off, and hopefully those new roots will accept some of that water. It'll just be a flush, won't have anything in it. I'm not trying to encourage this to grow or do anything like that, so I'm not interested in any additives. It'll just get a flush, which is what it had yesterday, and then next time round it will get a bit of feed. So there we go. That was a semi-pot on, a combination of potting it on, which was the main function, but there was a little bit of a repot as well, because we did tease out, so I deliberately teased out some of the old media. It didn't fall out, it needed some help. So that's that one done. I'm happy with that. That now goes up with the cotyledon collection, which is getting quite large nowadays. This is about the last plant I've got room for on that single shelf. And it's quite nice to have them all on the same shelf. I like that idea. Doesn't always work, but so far with these it's just about working, because this is a small plant. So there we go. See you next time. Bye for now.